The boardroom on the 14th floor of Harlow Capital smelled like fresh coffee and old money, and neither of those things belonged to Daniel Reeves. He'd taken the elevator up from the parking garage, same as always, his work jacket still damp from the November rain outside. He was 12 minutes late. He knew it before he even pushed through the glass doors. He knew it the way you know when a storm is coming. Not from the sky, but from the way everything goes quiet. Margaret Harlow was already standing at the head of the table. She didn't look up when he came in. That was the first sign. "Close the door behind you, Mr. Reeves." Her voice was the kind of calm that took years to cultivate. Not the calm of a woman at peace, the calm of a woman who had decided something before breakfast and wasn't going to be talked out of it. Daniel Reeves pulled the door shut and stood near the back of the room. 14 people at that table. Senior partners, department heads, 2 people from legal he'd never seen before. All of them were looking at their laptops or their phones or a spot on the wall just slightly to the left of him. Nobody met his eyes. He was 38 years old, the building superintendent for Harlow Capital's 3 downtown Toronto properties, and he had been with the company for 6 years. He knew every pipe, every fuse box, every service elevator quirk in all 3 buildings. He had never once missed a scheduled inspection. He had been late exactly twice in 6 years. Once when the gardener was a parking lot after a truck fire. And today, Margaret Harlow finally looked at him. She was 41 years old, dark hair pulled back, a charcoal blazer that probably cost more than Daniel made in a week. She had taken over Harlow Capital from her father 4 years ago and had doubled its portfolio in 3. The financial press called her decisive. The people who worked for her called her something else. "We had a maintenance walkthrough scheduled this morning," she said. "Facilities review. You were supposed to lead it. I know. I apologize. The contractors waited 20 minutes and then left. I understand. Do you know what that walkthrough was for, Mr. Reeves?" He did. He'd read the brief twice the night before. Safety compliance review ahead of the insurance renewal, which needs to be completed by end of month. Her voice didn't rise. It never rose, which now has to be rescheduled. Which means we are looking at a late filing, which means a gap in coverage, which means liability exposure for 3 commercial properties. She paused. "Because you were 12 minutes late." Something moved behind Daniel's eyes. Not anger. Something more tired than that. "You're right," he said. "I apologize. I don't want an apology." She stepped out from behind the table. "I want the people in this room to understand that it doesn't matter what position you hold. You can be a partner or you can be the person who keeps the lights on. Accountability applies to everyone equally. Are we clear?" Daniel looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then he nodded. "You're dismissed from Harlow Capital, effective immediately. HR will process your final pay. Please leave your access cards and keys with reception." Nobody at the table moved. Daniel didn't move for a moment either. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and set his keycard and his building master on the table in front of him. 2 small things that represented 6 years of early mornings and frozen pipes and emergency calls at 2 a.m. He picked up his bag. "Thank you for the opportunity," he said. He walked out. The elevator doors opened immediately, like they'd been waiting for him. He stepped in, pressed the lobby button, and watched the doors close on the boardroom, full of people who were already looking at something else. Nobody knew that in 4 hours Margaret Harlow's daughter would be in the back of an ambulance, and the only person she'd ask for was the man her mother had just fired. Nobody knew that yet. The rain was heavier when Daniel got outside. He stood under the awning for a moment, hands in his pockets, watching the traffic on Bay Street inch through the gray November afternoon. He was thinking about Lily. He was always thinking about Lily. She was 9 years old, and he was supposed to pick her up from school at 3:30. It was now 12 past noon. He had time. He pulled out his phone and sent her a message through the school's parent app. "Dad's day went sideways. Nothing to worry about. See you at pickup. Love you." The response came 40 seconds later, a row of question marks and then a heart. He smiled despite everything. The subway platform at King Station was crowded with the lunch rush. Daniel found a seat in the corner of a car and pulled out the book he'd been carrying in his bag for 3 weeks without actually reading. He stared at the same page for 2 stops, then gave up and put it away. He thought about what he was going to tell Lily. Not the whole truth. She was 9, not 9 going on 40, but something. She noticed everything, she always had, since she was small. Her mother used to say Lily had her father's eyes and nobody's ability to pretend things were fine when they weren't. Sophie had been like that too, actually, incapable of pretending. It had made her a terrible poker player and a remarkable person. She'd been gone for 2 years. Brain aneurysm, sudden, no warning, no goodbye. Here one morning and then not. It was still the wrong shape in his chest, even now. He'd learned to carry it without dropping things, but it was never light. The train surfaced from underground near Bloor, and Daniel watched the city slide by the window. Gray buildings, gray sky, a yellow maple that had somehow held onto its leaves. Toronto in November looked exactly like he felt. He got off at his stop and walked 4 blocks to the apartment. It was a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a mid-rise in the annex, clean but modest. Lily had the bedroom with the window that looked onto the park. Daniel slept on a fold-out couch he'd never quite gotten around to replacing because the couch was fine and there was always something else to spend the money on. Lily's winter coat, Lily's school supplies, the broken exhaust fan in the bathroom that he hadn't been able to fix because the tools he needed were in his work locker, which was now someone else's work locker. He sat down at the kitchen table and opened his laptop. The job postings blurred together. Building manager, property services technician, facilities coordinator. Most of them wanted references he'd have to figure out how to navigate. Most of them had overnight shifts or on-call requirements that would mean scrambling for childcare. He'd done it before. He could do it again. His phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize. This is Daniel Reeves. Mr. Reeves, this is Claire Okafor from Rosemont Academy, Lily's classroom teacher. I'm calling because there's been an incident during lunch recess and we need you to come in. His stomach dropped the way it always did when the school called. Is she hurt? She's okay, but I'd rather discuss it in person. How soon can you get here? He was already on his feet. 20 minutes. He took a cab. He couldn't afford it, but he took it anyway. Lily was sitting in the school nurse's office when he arrived, a scratch on her chin and mud on her knees, wearing the expression she always wore when she was trying not to cry and succeeding through sheer force of will. She looked exactly like Sophie when she did that. It hit him the same way it always did. Hey, he crouched down in front of her. What happened? Some kid, she said. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. She pressed her lips together. They were saying stuff and I told them to stop and one of them pushed me and I fell. What were they saying? Lily looked at her shoes. About not having a mom. The school nurse and the teacher both looked at the wall. Daniel put his hand over Lily's and kept it there until she stopped looking at the floor. You okay? Yeah, she sniffed. I'm okay. He believed her. Lily was tougher than she had any reason to be, and he was proud of her for it in a way that also broke his heart a little every day. They walked home together. She told him about the book she was reading. He told her his day had been interesting. She didn't push. She could tell when he wasn't ready to talk about something, which was a kindness he didn't deserve from a 9-year-old. Dad, she said when they were almost home. Yeah? Are we going to be okay? He looked at her. She was watching him with those careful eyes that saw too much. Yes, he said. We're always okay. She nodded, satisfied by something in how he said it, and went back to telling him about her book. Margaret Harlow's afternoon continued the way all her afternoons continued. Back to back, no breaks, no room for noise. She had a call with the Vancouver office at 2, a meeting with the risk team at 3:15, a site visit at 4:30 for the new Yorkville property she was considering acquiring. In between all of it, she thought about the morning for approximately 90 seconds, came to the same conclusion she always came to. Standards apply to everyone, full stop, and moved on. Or she tried to. Marcus Lane, her head of operations, and the closest thing she had to a person who would actually tell her when she was wrong, stopped by her office at 4. Do you have a minute? No. He came in anyway and sat down without being invited, which was one of the things she tolerated about him because it happened to be useful. The facilities contractor called, he said. David Reeves. Daniel Reeves. A pause. Right. They're saying he was one of the best building supervisors they'd ever worked with. 3 of the property managers wanted to flag it before anyone made his termination official. It's already official. Margaret. He was late to a compliance walkthrough. He was 12 minutes late once in 6 years. His record is clean. We don't even know why he was late. She looked at Marcus steadily. It doesn't matter why. It doesn't. If I make exceptions, everyone starts calculating when the rules apply to them and when they don't. That's how standards erode. She turned back to her screen. That's how my father ran this company for the last 10 years he was in charge, and it nearly killed us. I won't do it. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I think you're right about the standard. I think the way you applied it this morning was wrong. Get out, Marcus. He got out. But he left the door open just slightly on his way, which was his version of making a point. Margaret stared at her screen. The numbers looked the way numbers always looked, like the only things in the world that behaved the way they were supposed to. Her phone rang. Her ex-husband, Thomas. She let it ring twice before answering. What is it? Olivia has something on at the school Friday. She wants both of us there. I have a board call Friday afternoon. It's at 11. She pulled up her calendar. I can move the 11:30. What kind of something? A reading presentation. She's been working on it for 2 weeks. She's really proud of it. Something softened in Margaret's chest, brief and unguarded. Olivia was 10 years old and had recently decided she wanted to be a writer, which meant the whole apartment Thomas kept in Rosedale was now covered in notebooks. I'll be there. Good. She'll be happy. A pause. She was asking about you this week. More than usual. What do you mean? Just? She notices when you're stretched thin. She's perceptive. Margaret thought about the compliance review, about the board call she'd moved to make room for a Friday morning reading presentation, about all the things that were always needing to be moved. Tell her I'll see her Friday, and that I'm fine. Thomas didn't say anything to that, which was its own kind of answer. She left the office at 6:30, which was early for her. Paul, her driver, had the car out front. She sat in the back watching the city lights come on over the lake. Her phone rang. An unknown number. Margaret Harlow, Ms. Harlow. This is Constable Andrea Delorme with Toronto Police Service. I'm calling about your daughter, Olivia. Everything else in the world stopped. Is she? She's safe. She's at Sick Kids being assessed as a precaution. There was an incident near Rosemont Academy this afternoon. Your ex-husband is already at the hospital. He wanted us to reach you directly. What kind of incident? A man attempted to take your daughter from the schoolyard perimeter during after-school pickup. She wasn't harmed. She screamed and ran, and bystanders intervened. One individual in particular. I'm on my way. She was already leaning forward. Paul, Sick Kids, now. The ride took 11 minutes. She counted them. The hospital emergency entrance was lit up against the dark afternoon. Families moving in and out, a man with a child on his hip, an older woman speaking quietly into her phone. Margaret walked straight to reception. Olivia Harlow. She was brought in within the last 2 hours, the nurse typed. Room 7, through those doors on your right. Thomas was in the hallway outside room 7, still in his jacket, his face the color of old concrete. Where is she? Margaret said. Inside. The doctor's just finishing. She's okay, Margaret. She's okay. Tell me exactly what happened. Constable Delorme materialized from a side room. She was compact and calm, the kind of calm that came from doing hard things regularly. Mrs. Harlow, why don't we step in here? I want to see my daughter. The doctor asked for 3 more minutes. He's almost done. Thomas put his hand briefly on Margaret's arm. She didn't shake it off. In the family room, Constable Delorme explained what the police knew. A man had been observed near the Rosemont Academy perimeter over the past several days. That afternoon, he'd approached Olivia as she waited for Thomas at the school gate. He told her Margaret had sent him. He grabbed her wrist when she tried to pull away. She screamed, Constable Delorme said, immediately and loudly. There were 3 bystanders who responded. A woman walking her dog, a cyclist, and a man named Daniel Reeves who was across the street. The name landed in the middle of Margaret's chest like a stone dropped into still water. He intervened physically, the constable continued, placed himself between Olivia and the assailant. There was a struggle. The suspect fled on foot. Mr. Reeves sustained some injuries. He's being assessed in another room. He stayed with Olivia until police arrived and didn't leave until she was in our custody. Thomas spoke quietly. He didn't leave her. Margaret realized she hadn't said anything. What room is he in? Ms. Harlow, your daughter. Thomas can go to Olivia. I'll be there in 2 minutes. What room? Constable Delorme looked at her for a moment. Room 12. Olivia was sitting up in bed when Margaret came in, 3 minutes later than she'd said, but closer than she'd been in a long time. Her dark hair was tangled, and she had a bruise forming on her wrist, and she burst into tears the moment she saw her mother, not sad tears, but the kind that come when the thing you've been holding together finally gets to fall apart because someone safe is in the room. Margaret crossed to her and held on. I'm here, she said. I'm here. I've got you. Olivia was 10 years old and not small for her age, but she seemed very small right now, her face pressed into her mother's shoulder, shaking slightly. He said you sent him. I knew it wasn't true because you would have told me. You always text when you're sending someone. That's right, Margaret said, her voice very steady. I always text. You did exactly right. There was a man. He came really fast. He yelled at the bad man, and the bad man let go and ran away. I know, his nose was bleeding, but he said he was fine. He asked me if I liked riddles because he said riddles were better than crying. She hiccuped slightly. He was right. I'm going to go thank him. Olivia pulled back and looked at her mother. He works in your building, he told me. He used to, Margaret said. Something sat badly in her throat. He doesn't anymore. She found room 12 at the end of the corridor. The door was ajar. She pushed it open. Daniel was sitting on the edge of the hospital bed in his work jacket, which was no longer damp from the rain but had a dark stain across the left shoulder that she suspected wasn't water. A nurse was finishing taping a bandage above his eyebrow. His lower lip was split. His right eye was swelling shut, the skin around it already settling into deep purple. He looked up when she came in. Neither of them said anything for a moment. "How is she?" he asked. "She's fine. Because of you." He nodded once, the careful nod of someone checking to see if their neck still worked. "Good." The nurse finished and slipped out, pulling the door most of the way closed. Margaret stood near the door because she didn't know where else to stand. She had been in rooms where people were angry with her before. She knew how to handle anger. She didn't know what to do with whatever was in this room, which was not anger at all. "Mr. Reeves," she said, "I owe you an apology. You don't." His voice was flat, not cold, just factual. "I made a judgment without asking questions. I don't do that in business, or I'm not supposed to." She stopped. "I did it this morning. With you." Daniel looked at her with his one good eye and didn't say anything. "You were late because of Lily," she said. It was not a question. Something shifted in his face, brief and controlled. "There was an incident at her school. It wasn't serious, but I needed to go." "What kind of incident?" "Some kids." "She's fine." Margaret thought about Olivia in room 7. About what it meant to get a call from your child's school and need to go. Right now, no questions. Everything else stops. About what she would have done this morning if she'd gotten that call. She knew exactly what she would have done. She would have left the meeting. Without an explanation, without a backward glance. And she would have expected everyone to understand. "Why didn't you tell me?" she said. Daniel stood up slowly, one hand briefly at his ribs. Would it have changed anything? The question was the most honest thing anyone had said to her in months. She stood with it for a moment. "I don't know," she said. "I'd like to think it would have. That's not an answer. No, it isn't." She looked at him directly. "I think this morning in that room, with everyone watching, I'm not sure I would have listened. I was making a point. And points don't listen well." Daniel was quiet. He reached for his bag on the chair beside the bed, moving with the careful deliberateness of someone managing pain. "My daughter is going to be fine because you were there," Margaret said. "Whatever happened between us this morning, that is what happened tonight. And I want to do something about it. You don't owe me anything. I owe you quite a bit, actually." "No." He picked up his bag. "You don't. What I did tonight was not a transaction. I heard a child screaming, and I was there, and I did what needed to be done. That's it. Don't make it into something you can pay back. Then at least let me drive you home." He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite categorize. Not contempt, not warmth, exactly. Something in between that was harder to manage than either. "I can take the subway, with a possible concussion and cracked ribs." A pause. "Fine," he said. They rode the elevator down without speaking. Her car was out front, Paul already standing at the door without needing to be told. Daniel gave an address in the annex. Paul pulled into traffic. Margaret watched the city through the window. The streets were wet and the streetlights made long reflections on the pavement, orange and white, blurring at the edges. "Your daughter," she said. "What's she like?" "Smart." A pause. "Stubborn. She reads constantly. She has opinions about everything." He said it the way parents said things like that, frustrated and proud in exactly equal measure. "She's too perceptive for her own good. How long has it been just the two of you?" He looked out his window. 2 years. Her mother died. "I'm sorry, everyone is." It wasn't cruel, the way he said it. Just true. "It's just the two of you," Margaret said. "And this morning I made that harder. You made a decision based on what you could see." He turned to look at her for the first time since they'd gotten into the car. "What you couldn't see was why I was 12 minutes late. What you couldn't see was the call from Lily's school and the cab I took to get there and back, which used most of what I had in my wallet. Or the fact that I'd been up until 1 in the morning fixing a water pressure issue in the King Street property that would have cost you 3 times as much if it had waited until Monday." He stopped. "Not that it matters now." Margaret didn't look away from him. "It matters, does it?" "Yes." The car turned onto a quieter street. Older buildings, maple trees that had gone bare, a convenience store with its lights on warm against the dark. Daniel watched the neighborhood without expression. "I could reinstate you," Margaret said. "I could give you your position back and a raise, and I could make sure HR noted the error in judgment on my end, not yours." "No, why not?" He looked at her. "Because I don't want a position that was given back out of guilt." "It wouldn't be guilt. It would be correcting a mistake. It would be both, and you know it." He shifted carefully in his seat. "I appreciate what you're trying to do. I do, but I can't walk back into that building as the man who got fired and then rehired because he happened to be in the right place. I'd never be anything else. Then what can I do?" The question came out more honestly than she'd intended. He seemed to notice. "Take care of your daughter," he said. "The rest will sort itself out." The car stopped in front of a mid-rise building on a quiet street. A light was on in a third-floor window. Daniel looked up at it for a moment. "Mrs. Okafor's up there with Lily," he said, mostly to himself. He looked back at Margaret. "She's probably wondering why I'm not home yet. Will you tell her what happened?" "Some of it. A ghost of something. Not quite a smile." The kid-friendly version. He got out of the car, then he turned back. "I hope Olivia sleeps okay tonight," he said. "First few nights after something like that are the hardest." He closed the door before she could answer. Paul drove away from the curb. Margaret watched the building until it was gone, that third-floor light still on in the window, and something settled into a dull ache in the middle of her chest. She went back to sick kids. Olivia was sleeping. Thomas was in the chair beside her, scrolling through his phone, and he looked up when Margaret came in. "How's the man who helped her?" he asked. "He'll be all right. Did you talk to him?" "Briefly." Thomas looked at her. He knew her in the specific way that ex-husbands did, not without affection, but without the protective softening that came with being in love. "You fired him this morning." "Yes." "And he still helped her." "Yes." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "That says something about him. It says something about me, too." She sat down in the chair across from him on the other side of Olivia's bed. "I've been thinking about that all evening." They sat in the particular silence of two people who had failed at being married, but had managed to succeed at the harder thing, the thing that came after. After a while, Thomas said, "She asked for you first, when I got there." First thing out of her mouth. Margaret looked at her daughter's sleeping face, the bruise on her wrist, the small crease between her brows that appeared even in sleep when she was working something out. "I know I'm not always." Margaret stopped. Started again. "I know there are things I get wrong. You're getting better. I'm trying." She reached over and tucked the blanket up around Olivia's shoulder. That used to feel like enough. Thomas didn't ask what had changed. He didn't need to. She stayed the night. Slept in the chair and woke up with a stiff neck and Olivia's hand in hers, placed there sometime in the night without either of them being awake enough to remember it. Marcus came to see her the next morning in her office. She had coffee waiting for him, which surprised him enough that he sat down without preamble. "I looked into it," he said. "Daniel Reeves. His daughter had an incident at school that morning. He documented it with reception when he got back to the building." Margaret nodded. "He didn't file a complaint against us, didn't call anyone, just turned in his keys and left." "I know." Marcus looked at her. "What are you going to do? The right thing, which is harder than the correct thing, apparently." She turned her coffee cup in her hands. "He doesn't want his job back. Can you blame him?" "No." She looked out the window. The lake was iron gray this morning, the CN Tower barely visible through the cloud. "But I'm not out of options. There's the facilities consulting position we've been trying to fill. Contract role, flexible hours, work-from-home components. The person we hired in the spring quit in September." She paused. "It's a better role than what he had. Better pay, more scope, more independence. He'll say it's charity. Then I'll tell him he's wrong and I'll give him the documentation to prove it. The role has been open for 2 months. His background is exactly what we need." She looked at Marcus steadily. "He has military training. He did 3 years with emergency response services before a personal situation required him to step back. He took a lower position than he was qualified for because it had regular hours and benefits, and he needed to be home." She paused. "I read his file last night. A bit late for that." "Yes," she said. "It is." She didn't call Daniel that week. She thought about it. She picked up her phone twice and put it back down. Marcus was right. He needed space, and he needed her to mean it when she finally reached out, and she wasn't going to manage that by calling before she'd actually worked out what she meant to say. She started saying it in other ways instead. On Wednesday, she held a meeting with the building management team and apologized directly for not asking questions that morning. Not in the vague, corporate way she sometimes apologized. Not mistakes were made or processes could be improved, but plainly in sentences using her own name. She told them what had happened, what she should have done differently, and what she was going to do about it. People shifted in their seats. A few looked like they might cry. One of the senior managers, a woman named Patricia who had been with the company for 9 years, sent her an email afterward with nothing in it except thank you. On Friday, she went to Olivia's reading presentation at Rosemont Academy and sat in the third row beside Thomas and listened to her daughter read aloud from a story she'd written about a girl who discovers that the old lighthouse at the edge of town is actually a library for people who've lost things they can't name. It was good. It was genuinely, unexpectedly good, and Margaret laughed in the right places and clapped too hard at the end, and Olivia beamed at her from the front of the room with her whole face, the way she used to when she was little, and Margaret thought, "This is what I have been missing. Right here. This specific light." She left the school and sat in her car for a while before calling Paul. On Saturday morning, she texted Daniel, "I have a professional proposition for you. Not charity, not guilt. I can explain it by email if you'd rather not speak directly. Either way, I think you should hear it." He didn't respond for several hours. She went for a run along the waterfront, came back, showered, made tea, and was reading on her couch when her phone buzzed. "What kind of proposition?" She wrote back, "The facilities consulting role we've had posted for 2 months. Contract, flexible hours, remote compatible. Your background fits it better than any of the other candidates we've interviewed. I can send you the posting if you want to see it on paper." Another long pause. "Send it." She forwarded the posting. He read it. She knew he was reading it because the little indicator sat on delivered and didn't move to read for almost 10 minutes, and then it did. Then nothing for another 20. She was starting to think she'd pushed too far when her phone buzzed. "This isn't the same role." "No," she wrote back. "It's better. That's not to manage what happened. It's because the role has been open, and you're the right fit. If you want to verify that independently, Marcus Lane will speak to you directly. He's the one who pulled the job specs. I just looked at them after." Another pause. "I'll need to think about it, of course. And I want to be clear, I'm not coming back to prove anything. If I take this, it's because the work is good work and the terms make sense for Lily. Not because I owe you anything. That's exactly how it should be," she wrote. And she meant it. He called her 3 days later. "I spoke to Marcus," he said. "He answered every question I had. Good, the scope of the role is real. He wasn't just, 'It's real, Daniel.'" A pause. She'd used his first name without thinking about it. He didn't comment. "Lily asked about Olivia," he said, "whether she was okay. She heard me talking on the phone that night and worked out most of what happened." A breath. "She said to tell your daughter that she hopes she's doing okay." From one tough kid to another, apparently. Something unexpected moved through Margaret's chest. "I'll tell her. She'll want to write a card probably. She goes through phases of being very into writing cards. Olivia would like that." Silence for a moment, but a different kind than before. The kind that had space in it. "I'll take the role," Daniel said. 3-month trial. If it works, we reassess." 3-month trial, she agreed. "That seems reasonable, and I want it on the record that I'm evaluating your company as much as you're evaluating me." She almost smiled. "Also reasonable? Okay. He started the following Monday. He didn't have an office in the building. The role was designed to be distributed, which suited him, but he came in on Tuesdays and Thursdays for meetings, and Margaret saw him occasionally in the hallways, usually deep in conversation with someone from the facilities team, carrying a clipboard or a set of plans or a coffee that was always already half finished by the time she spotted him. He was good at the work. She had known he would be, from his file, but watching it was different. He had a specific kind of attention, the attention of someone who had learned that small problems, caught early, were the only kind worth tolerating. He didn't miss things. He also didn't perform knowing things, which was more unusual than it should have been in a building full of people who were paid to perform competence. In the second week, she stopped by a walkthrough he was leading for the New Yorkville property. The acquisition had gone through, finally. He was explaining load-bearing modifications to a contractor who kept trying to talk over him, and he waited the contractor out with the patience of someone who had a lot of practice not being listened to, and then said his piece clearly and didn't raise his voice. And the contractor changed course without making it obvious that he was changing course. Afterward, Margaret fell into step beside him as he walked the perimeter of the building. "You handled that well," she said. "He's good at his job," Daniel said. "He just needed to get the showing off out of the way first. Is that a skill? Knowing when someone's showing off? It's useful. He wrote something on his clipboard. You do it sometimes." She looked at him. "Do I in board meetings. The first 10 minutes. Then you settle." It was such a direct observation that for a moment she didn't know what to do with it. Then she laughed. It came out louder than she'd intended and genuinely surprised her. He looked at her with one eyebrow slightly raised, which was the closest to warmth she'd seen from him yet. "I'll take that as fair feedback," she said. "It wasn't a criticism. Everyone has something they do to manage a room. Yours just happens to be noticeable." A pause. "Mine is asking too many questions before I'll commit to anything." "I know. I'm aware that you know." They walked in silence for a moment. The street outside was busy with lunch traffic, people spilling out of the restaurant on the corner, a streetcar grinding past. "How's Lily?" Margaret asked. "Good. Better. Her teacher says she's been talking more in class." He said it the way he said most things about his daughter, with a careful pride that tried not to sound too much like relief. "She's started a chapter book." "About what?" "A girl who can talk to weather systems." He glanced at her. "Don't ask me to explain the plot. And she's the kids at school. Getting better, he said. Mostly, she's made a friend. A girl named Hannah who also loves to read and apparently has very strong opinions about which season is best. What season does Lily think is best? Spring, he paused. Because of the mud. She finds mud aesthetically interesting. Margaret thought about Olivia and her notebooks. Two kids with vivid internal lives who came by them the hard way. Olivia's been asking about her, she said. She got Lily's card and read it 4 times. Daniel glanced over. She wants to write back, Margaret said. If that's all right. He was quiet for a moment. The sun came through the bare trees at the edge of the property, pale and thin. Then he said, yeah, that's all right. December arrived before either of them was entirely ready for it. Toronto went from cold to serious without much transition, the kind of cold that required real coats and real commitment. The letters between Olivia and Lily continued. Margaret saw one of them, not snooping. Olivia had left it on the kitchen counter and then forgotten it when Thomas picked her up, and Margaret had moved it off the burner without reading past the first 2 lines, which were, Dear Lily, I have a cat named Biscuit who thinks he runs the house, and honestly, he might be right. She'd set it carefully by Olivia's backpack and felt something warm and uncomplicated, which was not something she felt very often. At work, things were shifting. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the way that real shifts happened, through small corrections accumulating until the direction changed. She asked more questions before deciding. She asked Marcus to tell her when she was wrong, and he did, and she was wrong occasionally, and it turned out the company survived that fine. She went to Olivia's swim meet on a Thursday afternoon and didn't check her phone for 2 hours. One evening in mid-December, Daniel knocked on her office door on his way out. There's something I need to tell you, he said, about the King Street building. Come in. He came in and sat down across from her. He still sat the way he always sat, slightly forward, weight on his feet, ready to leave. It occurred to her that she'd been watching him slowly stop doing that over the past 6 weeks. The electrical panel on the 3rd floor has been showing intermittent faults, he said. The night crew's been logging it, but nobody flagged it up the chain. It's not dangerous yet, but it will be by spring. What do we need? Full panel replacement. I've got 3 quotes. He set a folder on her desk. This one's the most expensive, but they're the only ones I'd trust to do it right. She looked at the quotes. The middle one had a small asterisk in pencil beside the total. She glanced up. That's the one you'd choose, she said. Yes, why not just say so, because it's your building? He looked at her steadily. And I've learned that some people need to feel like they're choosing, and do you think I'm one of those people? I think you used to be. He picked up the folder. I wasn't sure anymore. She looked at him. He looked back. Outside the window, the first real snow of the season had started, coming down in heavy straight lines that made the city look briefly clean. The middle one, she said. Schedule it for January. He nodded and stood up. She thought he was going to leave. Instead, he paused at the door. Lily wants to know if Olivia would come to her school's winter concert, he said. It's the 19th. She's in the choir. Olivia would love that. There's a dinner after. The school does this thing in the gym. It's not fancy. I didn't think it was. I just mean, he stopped, reconsidered. We'd both come. If that's okay. Margaret understood what he wasn't saying, both of them, not just the girls, both of them in a school gym in the annex on a December evening watching their daughters sing. That's okay, she said. December 19th was cold and clear, the sky so dark it had a depth to it, and every star was where it should be. They arrived separately. Logistics, Olivia was coming from Thomas's place, and met in the school lobby, which was decorated in construction paper snowflakes and smelled like glue and pine. Lily was already in the choir formation when they got to the gym, wearing the same purple sweater she'd apparently worn to every important event this fall, according to Daniel, who said it like someone who had stopped arguing about it. She spotted Olivia and waved once, delighted and slightly embarrassed in equal measure. Olivia waved back with both hands. They found seats in the middle. Margaret sat next to Daniel. Olivia sat on the other side of her, already explaining to the child sitting behind her the subtle differences between a round and a cannon. The choir filed in. Lily found her spot in the back row. She was tall for her age, same as her father, and stood very straight and looked out into the audience with the expression of someone who was handling their feelings with discipline. The music teacher raised her hands. They sang 5 songs. Lily knew all the words to 4 of them and was clearly working out the 5th as she went, which she did with the same steady composure she seemed to bring to most things. Olivia mouthed along from the audience. At one point, Daniel leaned slightly toward Margaret and said very quietly, "She's been practicing that second one for 3 weeks." And Margaret could hear in his voice something that had no name. just relief and love and the particular weight of raising someone mostly alone and watching them hold themselves together in the world. After the concert, the gym was reorganized into dinner. Folding tables, donated lasagnas, juice boxes for the kids, and bad coffee for the adults. Lily and Olivia immediately disappeared into a corner with Lily's best friend Hannah, and the three of them began what appeared to be a very serious conversation about something. Daniel and Margaret found a table near the edge of the room. He brought them both coffee without asking, which meant he'd noticed she took it black, which meant he paid attention, which she was starting to accept was simply who he was. "How long has Lily been singing?" Margaret asked. "She started the choir this fall." He wrapped both hands around his cup. "She didn't tell me until the rehearsals were already half done. She said she wanted to know she was actually going to stick with it before she announced it. Smart, cautious." A pause. "She picks that up from me. Is caution a problem? It keeps you safe," he said. "It also keeps you still." Margaret thought about the way she'd been running for the past 4 years. Moving fast, deciding fast, controlling what she could. She'd told herself it was decisiveness. Some of it had been. Some of it had been something else. "I've been thinking about the morning I fired you," she said. "Not with guilt anymore. More, I've been trying to understand the version of me that didn't ask. And I think she believed that asking would look like weakness, that listening would cost her something, that being fair and being effective were the same thing." She looked at her coffee. She was wrong about all of that, but she didn't know it yet. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Across the gym, Lily had made Olivia and Hannah laugh at something, and Lily looked pleased with herself in the modest way she apparently had. "I wasn't always easy to work for," Margaret said. "Before any of this, I know, people who work in facilities, in any kind of maintenance role, I think I looked through them more than I looked at them. I knew the properties. I didn't know the people. Most people with your job don't. That's not an excuse." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." She looked at him. "I'm still figuring this out. I want you to know that I know I'm still figuring it out." "That's fine," he said. "I'm still figuring out how to let anyone in long enough to help." He glanced across the gym at Lily. "She keeps telling me I need to stop waiting for things to be safe before I try them. She's 9, she's perceptive." A very slight smile. "She gets it from her mother." The evening ended the way good evenings ended, slowly, without anyone quite wanting to be the first to leave. Lily and Olivia exchanged numbers on a piece of paper Hannah produced from her pocket, and they hugged goodbye in the school entrance with the intensity that only children and very old friends manage. Lily went up on her toes to reach properly. In the parking lot, Margaret and Daniel stood for a moment while Olivia talked to Thomas on the phone, explaining the concert with the full detail it deserved. "Thank you," Daniel said. "For coming?" "For Olivia, for letting them have this." He looked at his keys. "Lily's been different since she started getting those letters. Less inside herself." "Same," Margaret said. A streetcar went past on the avenue at the end of the street, its lights making a yellow smear in the dark. A cab. A delivery cyclist in a bright jacket. The ordinary traffic of the city going about its evening. "We're doing this differently than most people would," Margaret said. "Probably. I don't have a category for it. Neither do I." He looked at her sidelong. "But I've learned to be okay with things I don't have categories for. Eventually, she said. He almost smiled. The real version this time, not the restrained approximation. She drove home with Olivia in the back seat, half asleep against the window, still wearing her coat inside the car because she'd forgotten to take it off. The city at night was all light and dark in motion, indifferent to the small human arrangements being made within it. Margaret's phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. "Lily says to tell Olivia that spring is the best season because of the mud, but she's willing to hear other opinions." Margaret smiled. She typed back, "Olivia says tell Lily it's actually autumn because the colors. But she respects the mud argument." She put the phone down. Outside, the first snow of a real Toronto winter was beginning to fall again. By morning, it would cover everything, the sidewalks and the parking lots, and the bare branches of every maple on every street, and the city would look briefly like it was starting over. Margaret looked at her daughter in the rearview mirror. Olivia's eyes were closed, her face entirely at peace, one hand curled under her cheek. She was fine. She was going to be fine. And Margaret was going to keep showing up, not because it was easy, not because she had it worked out, but because this was what she'd been missing and now she knew it. And knowing it meant she didn't get to look away anymore. That was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.